Alright, before I start, let me make it clear that this is a mostly modern RPGs problem, but it does extend to many like action RPGs or even action adventure games as well. And it's this whole problem where we feel like we have player choice in these games still, but it's not to the same degree that we had them in a lot of older games. So they still in some way present you with like player choice in these games, but it's much more on the rails, or it's like disguised as player choice, not actual actionable player choice. And yeah, so that's what I want to talk about today. And keep in mind, that doesn't make these newer games automatically bad. It just makes them a lot different. Like some of them, they are genuinely bad, but I feel like most games, they have made this like intentional decision to have less player choice for actual reasons that I'll go into. And I have a couple of reasons why I feel like for some reason they might work in some cases, and in other cases, it doesn't work at all. And yeah, this isn't a good or bad thing kind of video. It's not like oh, we have less player choice, so automatically like the gaming industry is now failing. That's not what this video is. It's more so just going into the reasons why there's a lot less player choice in games now and what the effects of that looks like. So just a couple of bullet points on what I'll be going over in this video is things like fewer options to approach missions or complete side quests and things like that, or fewer meaningful dialogue options to have an actual bearing on the story or the world's reactivity to your actions. Also things like fewer systems that mix together unpredictably, but they actually are very exciting, and gameplay freedom paths that have been more restricted in many modern RPGs. Also, despite what people might tell you, there is actually a lot more hand-holding and I guess like guided direction in how they want you to approach the game from a lot of developers now, I guess, in the sense of how to play it correctly. And also another really interesting thing I want to talk about today is there's a lot less chances of like trial and error in games, whether it's in like the build crafting or the skill path upgrades. Games nowadays, they rarely let you make critical mistakes in like the makeup of roleplay and actually let you learn from your mistakes and overcome the challenges. And I want to start this by saying developers back then had a lot more faith in their players who played their games. And older games often let you just break quest lines, just skip basic learning experiences, miss loads of intended content by solving problems in your own weird ways, or just completely bypassing intentional design decisions if you didn't want to interact with them. And for me, this has led to a situation where a lot of these modern games, they make you feel like you have player choice, but it's really just a system where it's like, okay, here's options 1 through 3, and you can pick one of these ways to progress. The best way I can think of it here is like going by BioWare. Like with their older games such as Dragon Age Origins and Mass Effect 2, you could be on the like guided path from start to finish if you really wanted to, but you could also royally up and basically make the story just completely redundant in a complete waste of time if you chose to be a big dummy and just, I guess, quote unquote, break the game, if you will. Like Mass Effect 2 is the biggest example of this. If you somehow in that game managed to lose all your companions that you recruited along the way in the final mission, and you also die yourself, Mass Effect 3 will respond in a way that makes you feel very stupid, and it's actually really cool, so I won't spoil it. But the game lets you make those boneheaded decisions if you want to. Now, if you compare that to the more current BioWare games like Mass Effect Andromeda or Dragon Age The Veilguard, where your choices are more like shiny, turd, polished Fallout 4 options, where you get a couple of different ways to say basically the exact same things. And it's a much more tamed down system, and it makes it feel like there's player choice, but it's constantly telling you like, oh, you actually can't do this, and oh, you actually can't do that. Like the amount of morally gray or even damn near evil options in past BioWare games compared to their more recent games is like staggering. And oftentimes it feels like these newer games is like refereeing how you want to roleplay. Like in Dragon Age Origins, your character's background, their race, their class, their party approval, and even just the decisions they make all affects how the world like reacts to you and how the people in the world actually see you. In Mass Effect Andromeda, it has stripped all of that away, and no matter what you do, you are basically just like constantly disrespected for who you are and your background, and I absolutely hate that.
All right, what happened?
To who?
To whom? And your goddamn father.
Sorry, my face is tired from dealing with everything.
It's important to note that BioWare games didn't just lose these mechanics over time, but they forgot how important it was in an RPG game to let players be as like inconvenient or as antagonistic as possible and still be able to experience the game in some tangible way outside of their guardrails. But that leads me to my next point of how RPG games have gone from delivering unique roleplay systems to replacing those systems with massive amounts of redundant content. and you already know the studio I'm going to talk about with this one. But just to keep it more general for a second, a lot more of these modern RPGs, they're afraid of letting you choose to lock yourself out of certain content, or of like alienating certain companions, or of just failing quests in really stupid ways. And although this does make the game more, I guess, consistent, if you will, it does take away like the raw player experience of crafting a world in a way that you see fit. And the best example here is obviously Bethesda. You already knew I was going to talk about Bethesda with a video like this, but their games used to let you lock yourself out of entire factions, or even just sort of soft locking yourself in the main story if you built your character in a really weird or really unorthodox way. And this has led to a situation where players have tried as many different ways to break or change the game to see as many unique like gameplay paths that the game had to offer. But modern Bethesda, and particularly like with Starfield, they basically said like, oh, no, don't do that, because we want you to interact with this stuff and that stuff in the way that we want you to. Like, don't kill this NPC. Don't just ignore that quest line. We put it into the game for a reason. We want you to experience that stuff. You know what? How about we give you this? Instead, we'll just give you unlimited rinse and repeat, procedurally generated content so you don't feel like you've actually had anything taken away from you. And ever since Bethesda has taken away what made the open world exploration in their games so satisfying to a lot of people, like myself included, they actually feel like there's a lot less content in their newer games, even though technically it's the other way around. But you know what? Let me switch it up to something Bethesda really lacks, and there's the whole cinematic quality. And it's the next thing I want to talk about, which is the whole like cinematic boom in storytelling over a more, I guess, like subtle or systematic storytelling system that has ruined a lot of like the dynamism and player consequences. And I talked about this to some degree in my last Baldur's Gate 3 video, where I basically just glazed the game for 25 minutes straight, and I basically just admitted that I am an addict to that game and I need my fix like every week or so. But with a game like that, it allows you to make choices that will lead to cutscenes or responses from the game that are like so out of left field that they'll even surprise you, and they'll make you feel very surprised by the game's reactivity, even though you literally intended to do that thing. In the first, like, I don't know, like 500 hours or so that I've been playing that game, I was finding new ways to progress through the story, or just getting characters to respond to me differently depending on my actions. And for that to be reflected in the cutscenes was actually really cool to me. And half the times I would do such weird and bizarre things in the game, and I was like, ain't no way in hell the game is going to acknowledge that I did this really niche thing or took this really odd path to progress in this quest. But every single situation you could think of possibly in Baldur's Gate 3, there was a response for it. Like every single situation. And I know that this, like Baldur's Gate 3 is a more recent game. It came out in 2023, so this kind of destroys this argument in some sense. But I guess the case can be made that some modern games still do this in a way. But they're definitely still outnumbered at least like 10 to 1, at least in terms of like RPG games. I'll give a counter example, and even a really popular example, just to show I'm not trying to just dog on really unpopular games. But if you switch to like Red Dead Redemption 2, which, yes, I know it's not an RPG, and player choice mostly comes from RPG games, but it does come in other games as well. But the games sometimes present it in a very like cinematic way that you can actually choose or actually have some sway over how the story goes. And first, let me make it really clear that I like the cinematic experience that's present in Red Dead 2, and it's actually one of the only games that I can really tolerate it in nowadays. But basically, they only add a yes or no option on top of like the cinematic cutscenes that doesn't actually change the trajectory of the story, and it's kind of a letdown for me, I'm gonna be honest. And it does this consistently throughout the story. Again, yes, Red Dead Redemption 2 is not an RPG, I get all that, but the illusion of player choice mixed with these very cinematic moments is kind of my main point here. And in a way, I do sort of get it for a game of this magnitude because of how much effort has been put into like the cutscenes and how much dedication has been put into presenting some really hard cutscenes like Arthur's bus stop cutscene. And to get to those cutscenes, you have to lead players on a more guided path to experience that cutscene and not to miss out on it. But still, having a almost like a half-hearted player choice system in some of these cases, it just doesn't sit right with me for some reason. And lastly, one of the biggest strikes against like player choice, and something that really doesn't get talked about enough, and it's probably like my main reason for making this video, is how skill trees have basically taken away all player identity and replace it with the ultimate power fantasy in a lot of these modern RPG games. And I was going to make this game purely about Assassin's Creed Valhalla. That was actually my main original premise, but I decided to divert it from that and just talk about modern RPGs in general, because obviously Assassin's Creed Valhalla has a skill forest. It doesn't have a skill tree, but I decided that's kind of a redundant video because people have already talked about that game so much. So I just want to talk about modern RPG games in general here, and how a lot of these modern RPGs, or just modern games in general, they have given the player the ultimate power fantasy tool when, crafting or progressing with a character. They will give you like this like talent tree. They'll give you perks. They give you like progression within your builds or different playstyles, such as like maybe you have heavy armor and you have a character that also uses heavy weapons, and you're progressing with that system and you're progressing with it to its max. But then this next part is what I really hate about a lot of these modern games, is that they just let you be able to just switch and to leave that playstyle and go try a completely different playstyle. You can then go try a stealthy, light armor, quiet weapons build, and then do that to the max. And you can just switch back and forth freely with no consequence or nothing taken away. You're just given every single tool at your disposal, and you're given all this stuff in the same exact playthrough. And unfortunately, I have to call out probably one of my top 10 favorite games of all time in Cyberpunk 2077. And again, I could just use Assassin's Creed Valhalla as my example, the original premise for this video. But I feel like whenever you use really good games as the example in these discussions, it actually adds a lot more to the discussion about how these games use these systems. Firstly, let me say that I already understand that there's things within the narrative that explains why V can basically just be this proficient killing machine in basically all facets in any playstyles. I just wish that it was more limited and it made you actually pick what kind of V you wanted to play, rather than just playing a jack of all trades and master of basically everything and killing machine of everything. The reason this is such a big issue for me is because with Cyberpunk, even on very hard difficulty, it becomes pretty trivial after you reach basically like street cred 30 and player level 40. You basically will have everything, or if not almost all of the tools at your disposal in the entire game to just mow through any number of gang goons and badass soldiers as you see fit. At player level 40, I basically can go to the badass gate outside of Dogtown and just mow through those like hundreds of enemies that's out there. And it's easy. Even on very hard, it's basically easy as long as you know how to play it. It's the ultimate power fantasy at that point. And after that point, the combat is, while it is still really fun, like the whole power fantasy aspect of it is still really fun. Don't take this as me saying power fantasy is boring. That's obviously not what I'm saying. But what it does is it takes away all conscious decision making in terms of building a character when you add skill trees that are just completely open and non-restrictive in whatever path you want to take. Like for me, it would have been more interesting, and I would have liked it better if they added a system where, like, say if you're like a max level decked out netrunner and you have all the best net running skills and cyberware implants equipped, then you can't go above like level 8 or something for like body, because like why would you? You can take out an entire camp of enemies without even being seen with just contagion and synapse burnout. Like why would you then also want to go in there and brawl with them at the same time? Like that just, it doesn't make any sense to me from a balanced perspective. Now I can already hear some of you going like, wait dude, like you're lost in the sauce. That actually sounds like more player freedom. That sounds like more player choice. And it actually isn't. Like you got to think about it for a second. Why do games lock their skills behind certain trees? Why is everything not just available to you from the very start of the game? There's obviously a definite reason for that, because if you want to try a certain playstyle, the game still wants multiple playstyles in the game for different situations and different encounters. They still have that like goal in terms of how they want their players to engage with their game. If everything is available to you and you can just play anything and do everything, you can play nothing. That's basically the premise of what I'm going for here. Because again, you got to remember, this is player choice. Like if you have the choice to choose everything, that's not a choice then. That's just an open-ended spectrum of things that you can do. Like being able to choose something means you have to pick one option over many different options. But when all options are available to you, you can pick them all freely at the same time. That's not choice. Right? That's just open-ended freedom sandbox. So yeah, I understand that this point might be a little confusing for people, and they might be like, I still feel like there's more player choice and that's more player freedom. And honestly, we can have a genuine discussion about that in the comments. Like, don't take this video as me saying like that makes these modern games bad, or the fact that they have a lack of player choice in them bad now. Like they're just different from what they used to be back then. And I think that having the right expectations for many RPG games, or just many like different player choice games in general, will serve you better in the long run, if I'm being honest. Like most games don't want to, or they can't have player choice and build variety and even freedom as something like Dragon Age Origins or Fallout New Vegas, or even recent examples like Baldur's Gate 3. And even though that is kind of disappointing for me personally, And for a lot of old school gamers, we love that kind of stuff in our games. It's just not like the priority of a lot of these games now. I feel like they're trying to appeal to a broader market of players than they have been before, and that's completely okay. Like, that's not me criticizing them in that manner of how they're approaching their video games. But hey, that's just my thoughts on it. Leave your thoughts on the decline of player choice in video games in the comments down below, and we can get into the discussion about whether you agree or disagree with what I brought up or anything I might have failed to mention. I'm really interested to see what other players think about this, because this is something I've been thinking about for a while now, and it's something that people don't really talk about, is like the player choice, or maybe the lack of player choice that's in modern RPG games. But yeah, anyways, that's it for me. I'll see you next time.